Good evening and welcome to 365 Days of Amazing Stories with Theo Mayer. Here we are on day 159, and I'm continuing the story of the treasure seeker. Peter Block, the treasure seeker. Here he has now invited this young man to dinner with him, to sup. And so they left the wheelbarrow outside of the tavern. Wheelbarrow full of gold, covered with nails. Handmade nails. Now, if you've ever seen a handmade nail, they tend to be spikes. They're square in their shape, taper at one end, and they're beaten out typically with a hammer. They're not considered of much value. So, the gold was, well hidden. We can only hope. In they sat at the tavern. Nice table. Peter ordered them both the most delicious foods, and they were placed before the two of them. But this young man, he would eat none of the food. He ate a couple of bites, but, that was it. And Peter then ascertained that his sorrow must be from something of the heart. And so he implored the young man to tell him his story. But the young man said, "What good can it do to dwell on something that has brought me so much pain?" Said Peter, "It's best to share it, for perhaps, I might be able to help. You know how it is. Help often arrives in the most unexpected ways." The young man rolled his eyes, but then agreed and began his story. "Well," he said, "I was in the employment of a rich landowner. I was a crossbowman. I would go out hunting for game whenever he asked me to. And I took care of the horses and small little details around the place. He took good care of me. And once he came back after a trip away. He had many unusual items and gifts that he was sharing with people, but what caught my eye was the portrait of a young woman. She was beautiful, and I immediately fell in love with her. I asked him about her, and he laughed at me. Laughed that I would be in love with such a maiden as this, but I had, in my heart, decided that I would marry her. He would not help me at all to go off and seek her. He would not give me leave to go seek her, but he did tell me her name and where she lived. Being so struck by love, I ran away, and I went off to seek her. Now, I had ascertained that this young woman, she was not to be presented to any man, and she was, watched over by her mother, who was very mean and very rough. Determined to meet her still, I decided to disguise myself as an old woman, wishing to have a tablecloth made. For my master had told me that she was the best seamstress in all the land. Well, when I knocked upon the door, it was the young woman herself that opened it. I almost lost my wits. She was so beautiful and so sweet. But catching myself, I introduced myself as an old woman who was wishing for a tablecloth. She agreed to make it, and over the next couple of weeks, I had free rein to visit her whenever I wished. One time, I went over and her mother was not there. That time, in her presence, I took off my disguise. She was at first startled, but she calmed down, and I could tell that she was in some ways inclined toward me. I told her that I wished to marry her. I told her that I was in love with her. I could see in her eyes that the love was returned. But she said to me, "What is it that you do? And can you provide? For my mother, she will scorn a penniless vagabond." Well, I told her my story. She said, "You must go. My mother will never hear of it. If you stay, there will be trouble. Go, please. Seek your fortune and then come back." Reluctant as I was, a bitter pill this was to swallow. I knew I had to go. I turned and made my way out of the door. Casting my disguise off in the bushes, I started, foot bare, down the road. Well, what am I to do? I have no idea what I can do in order to win this beautiful maiden, Lucia. Now, Peter had been listening attentively to all the story, but when he heard the name Lucia, his ears pricked up, as you might imagine. And we'll stop the story there, see what happens next. And if when they get outside, is that wheelbarrow still there?